בוקר טוב, 91A1, אמר רב יהודה, אמר שמואל, מחייב היה רבי מאיר, אף במוציא חיטה אחת לזריעה. Rabbi Meir used to hold one liable even for taking out a single kernel of grain of wheat to plant. As we said in the Mishnah, that if one takes something to plant, so then he considers it important, and because for him it's important, he's liable. So the question is, so what's the big deal? Pshita, of course. Kol shutan, the Mishnah says, any amount, minute amount. Well, so the answer is that we could have thought different. We could have thought that when the Mishnah says kol shu, any amount, it only comes to exclude a large quantity, like a dried fig. But at least an olive volume should be required to hold one liable. So, okay, kamash belam. That even for less than an olive volume, even for a single kernel of wheat, one is liable. Yes, so here maybe you could have thought that kol shuhu is just less than the minimum, but at least more than any amount. Tzrichuta, that's okay. So what are we actually saying? That it all depends on the individual person. What the person considers significant, he is liable for that. It's up to him to decide. If for you it's so significant that you bother to go and plant it, so you're liable for that. So it all depends on each individual according to his subjective. So the question now is, do we say that it's subjective only to be stringent, to hold one liable for a very small amount, or maybe even to be lenient? What if somebody only considers a huge amount significant? Will he not be liable for something less than that? And that's the next question. What if a person intended to take everything in his house out into another domain at once? To move, but everything at once. For him, less than everything is not significant. So, would you say that he's not liable unless he actually takes out all of his belongings from the house? No, so the answer is no. There, his thoughts are negated in view of all other people. Yeah, so it's unacceptable. But to say that something too small is significant, that's acceptable. Any person would tell you that if he had the reason to plant one kernel of wheat, he would do it. So it's significant for anyone who considers it significant. Okay, and then the Mishnah said, "V'chol adam en chayavin alav ela k'shiuro." Other people are only liable for the prescribed amount. It's only the person, that specific person, who considered it significant, that he's liable for less than that. Matnitin de lo ke Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. The Mishnah is unlike Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. The Tanya, klal amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, kol she'eino kasher li'atznei, anything which is not fit to store. And people do not store such an amount. And somebody found it fit and he stored it away, and then came somebody else and carried it out. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, this one is liable on account of the intention of the owner. Our Mishnah says that even if the owner thought that it's significant, other people are not liable. It's only the owner. But Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that the owner determines the status of this thing for everyone else. Okay. Of course, Allah follows our Mishnah, not Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And now comes a series of cases. Begins with a statement of Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman. Oti ki grogeret la'achila. Since we said that the quantity depends on the purpose. The purpose determines the quantity for which one is liable. So what if a person changed his mind and he thought about a different purpose while he was performing the labor, before he completed it? So Amar Rav Nachman, Otiki grogeret la'achila. What if it took a quantity of a grogeret, which is fit for consumption? So when he lifted it in the private domain, that was his intention, to take it out for eating, the purpose of eating. And then, before he placed it down in the public domain, he changed his mind. He thought to plant it. Now, for planting, a different amount is significant, even less than kigrogeret. Or the other way around, or if he took it initially for planting, before he placed it down in the public domain, he reconsidered and thought to eat it. Says Rav Nachman Chayav, in both cases he's liable. And the question is, it sounds very obvious. Why should he not be liable? There's a proper quantity for both purposes that he thought about. It's a larger quantity, kegogeret, which is even fit for consumption, and certainly for planting, which is even a lesser quantity. Either one you follow, there's enough quantity. The quantity suffices. So the question is, Kita, of course. Go here, and you have the requisite volume present. Either way you go, there's always enough quantity. Yeah, we said that the intention, the purpose determines the quantity. If you plan to eat it, so the quantity is kigrogeret, size of a dried fig. If you want to plant it, so even a smaller size is important. Because on Shabbat, everything is melechet machshevet. Anything that is significant in your thought is a labor for which one is liable. Exactly. To eat is not enough. To eat, you need a volume of a fig, a dried fig. But to plant it, one kernel suffices. Oh, here the case is that he changed his mind in the middle of the labor. The labor consists of three parts. He has to pick it up in the private domain, transfer it to the public domain, and place it down there. So after he picked it up, which he started the labor, before he placed it down, he changed his mind. So he picks it up, and he wants to eat it. Instead of planting it. No, so now he decided instead of planting it, he's going to eat it. Before he ate it, he placed it down. But his intention is now to eat it, not to. So now he says that in either way he is liable because there's enough quantity for him to be liable for either intention. And the Gemara is asking, of course, why not? Well, the answer is that the time you could have thought that we require that one's removal of the object from its place, original place, and placing it down in the other domain must be done with the same intent. And if he changed his intention in the middle, we could have thought he might not be liable. That's novelty that there's no difference. His intention could be changed, but as long as there's a minimum measurement there, he's liable. And now, changing the mind when the kind puts up a problem and he thinks something differently, problem's not good. So good luck from there. When you change your mind, that's no different. But there too, it depends on the change of intent. In some cases, the korban is fine. Depends what his change was. What was the different intention? So here too, depends on the different intention. And now come a few inquiries about this. By Rava, what if he took out half the size of a dried fig, and his intention was to plant it? Now, for planting, that's a sufficient amount. So he's supposed to be liable. If he would have continued with the same intention and placed it down, it would be liable. But the case is v'tafcha. It in mid-transfer, it swelled to the volume of a full dried fig. And also, and also changed his mind and decided to eat it. And then he placed it down. Mau. So now at the time he lifted it in the private domain, and then his intention was to plant it, the quantity was sufficient for planting. At the time he changed his mind to eat it, the quantity was sufficient for eating. So according to this, maybe should be liable. But on the other side, if you want to conclude in the previous case, there is liable because because in both times he had enough quantity. But here, at the time he first lifted the object and took it out, did not contain the requisite volume for eating. It was just half a dried fig's volume and not the full fig's volume. And since his final intention was indeed to eat it before he placed it down, so maybe in this case he's not liable. Lo michayev. Or perhaps, a dilma, since if he had remained silent means he would not change his mind. And not would be liable if he would have continued with the same initial intention to plant it. He would be liable because there was the requisite. So now too he should be liable. That's another inquiry, and that's the halacha that he is liable. And then this continues with another development. If you want to conclude and say, since if he had remained silent and not change his mind, would be liable on account of his original intent to plant. So what if he took out a full dried fig size and his intention was to eat it, which is a sufficient amount for eating, and then it shrank in size. But then he also reconsidered and decided to plant it. For planting, that's a sufficient amount now. Mau. Here, in this case, if he would have remained silent, if he would have continued with the same original intent, he would not be liable. Because his original intent was to eat. And for eating, half dried fig volume is not enough.
So you're saying two things. He remained silent, and the other thing is he changed his mind. So is this something that has to be expressed?
No, it's just an expression that silence, like not changing his mind, is like remaining silent. His mind is silent. It's not. It all depends on his intention. It's not. Doesn't have to verbalize it. So המחשבה כמייתא לא מחייב, or perhaps maybe we just follow after one's current intent, and at each current moment, the requisite, the amount was fit to the intention. In the beginning, when the intention was to eat it, he had enough, he had a full fig's volume, and later when he changed his mind, there was a half fig's volume, was sufficient, u'michayev. And that's the halacha that he is liable. And then there is another inquiry that remains unresolved. If you'll conclude and say that we follow the current moment, the current intent, and if at any current moment the size fits to the intention, and therefore he's liable, what if he took out the size of a dried fig with the intention to eat it? He never changed his mind. However, that food shrank in the middle, and then swelled again. Now, do we say that since on the way it was for a moment, for some time? So that's the question. Can that change the status? So in the beginning, at the end, it was the proper size, but in the middle there was a stage that it was less than the requisite. Now, do we say that yesh dichulin and Shabbat is negation, or perhaps rejection with respect to Shabbat, or dichulin and Shabbat? Do we say that at the moment it shrank, maybe that cancels the original picking up? Because when you pick it up, that's the beginning of the labor. Maybe it should possess the same quantity all the way until he places it down. And if there is less than that in the middle, maybe it's not a proper labor. This remains teiku. Teiko is a doubt. So a person cannot bring an offering for such a case because might be chulin ba'azara, a doubtful situation. Maybe Asham Talui should bring. Asham Talui. And now comes another inquiry that also remains Teiko. Ba'a minei Rava merav Nachman. Zarak kazait truma levaitame. What if a person threw an olive's volume of truma into a house that was tamei? Now, what's the law? Now, we did not specify what is this inquiry about. Is it the laws of Shabbat, the laws of truma? So the Gemara wonders, lemay, what does it talk about? We're assuming it touches down inside the house. Right, it fell in the house. So what's the question? If the question is in the laws of Shabbat, that he threw it from the public domain into that private house, private domain, and the question is if he is liable, why should he be liable? We know that the minimum amount for Shabbat, for food, is kigrogeret, the size of a volume of a dried fig. And olive is less than that. So of course he should not be liable. Kigrogeret ba'inan. Now, ilinan tum'ah, if the question is with reference to tum'ah, whether that truma which he threw can now transmit tum'ah to other food. Halacha is that food cannot contaminate another food unless the contaminator has the volume of an egg. Now, since we talk about an olive's volume, obviously it cannot contaminate, that itself could become tameh, but it cannot contaminate others. So, kabeitza or chalin bainan? What's the question? So the doubt is not clear. What's the question about? So the answer is le'olam le'inyan Shabbat. The doubt is about Shabbat liability. If he's liable for throwing it from the public domain into the private domain, and why should one be liable for less than a fig's volume? The case is there's already there in the house some food less than an egg's volume, and this olive's volume completes it. It lands on that other food, becomes together with that an egg's volume. It rounded it out to the volume of an egg. So now the doubt is in the concept of migo, sins. Do we say that midda mitztaref le'inyan tumah, since this olive volume is considered significant in that it combines with the other food in that house, and from now on it can contaminate other food. So because of that significance, perhaps michayev nami le'inyan Shabbat, he should be liable with reference to Shabbat law as well. Because in general, we say that an olive's volume of food is insignificant. But in this specific case, this olive's volume perhaps is significant because it combines with another. That's what enables the other food, together with it, to contaminate other food. So maybe that significance is important and renders one liable for Shabbat transfer as well. Or perhaps, Adilma, Kol Inyan Shabbat, Kigogeret Beinan. With the laws of Shabbat, we only require a dried fig's volume, and no other significance can change. No, he transferred an olive's volume. But that olive's volume which he transferred, in this case, is significant because it combines with another food that was already in that tamei house, and now together there's an egg's volume which is significant to contaminate another food.
Significant contaminant. I'm saying he's not over carrying.
So that's one option. That there's no connection between the laws of Tumah and the laws of Shabbat. The laws of Shabbat, we have this requirement of a fixed volume, and therefore he's not liable. That's one option. But the other option is maybe we can say that in Shabbat what matters is the significance. If somebody considers something significant, he's liable even for less than the fixed volume. So in this case, perhaps the very fact that this olive's volume is now so significant that it, together with the other food in the house, can contaminate another food. So maybe that significance should also render the person liable for Shabbat transfer, because that's maybe significant. Two things at once. Yeah, so usually he's only liable for the more severe one. Yeah, but here, the more severe one, it's not two things, it's not two punishments. One is just the fact that it becomes an egg's volume and can contaminate another food. It's not. That's a fact. And the other thing is the liability for Shabbat. So that
Plus, it was well misguided because they didn't intend to join another piece.
maybe it didn't intend for that. Yeah. So Rav Nachman answered him, Tanitua, I have a braita that speaks about this matter. It says, Abba Shaul Omer, Shtei alechem velechem apanim. What if one took on Shabbat from the temple, on the Temple Mount, he took the 2 loaves of the Shavuot bread, or lechem apanim, the show bread, on Shabbat, and he took it out from a private domain to a public domain. The temple itself is a private domain, even though it's a public place, but as far as the laws of Shabbat are concerned, it's a private domain. It's surrounded by walls. So he took it from this private domain outside to the Temple Mount, which is a public domain, and he placed it down. What's the amount for which he is liable? Says shiuran kigrogeret. The measurement is as usual, like any other food, the volume of a dried fig. So if this braita, says Rav Nachman, can prove that the fact that a certain amount is significant in another law, it does not change the measurement for the law of Shabbat. Because here, we would say this concept of since it's an olive's volume is significant there, it should be significant here also, we could have applied that there also. We could have said, there's a special thing about these type of breads, that if they leave the temple courtyard, they become disqualified. And what's the amount in which they become disqualified? An olive's volume. Once you take an olive's volume from the showbread or from the 2 loaves outside the courtyard, it becomes disqualified. So that's a significant amount. An olive's volume there is a significant amount to become disqualified. So if we would have had this concept of since it's significant there, it should be significant here also. So there too, the liability for Shabbat should have been not a fig's volume, but rather an olive's volume, because it's considered significant. We should have said Lema, since it's important there, an olive's volume, Leinyan Shabbat Nami b'chazait. So with reference to Shabbat, the transfer of as little as an olive's volume should be liable, should be significant. Rather, since the braita rejects that conclusion, we can see that just because transfer is significant in one area of halacha does not mean that it's significant in Shabbat law too. So that was Rav Nachman's proof, but Rava rejects this and he says that there's no comparison between the 2 cases. There's no proof from there because how can you compare that? Hatam there, the disqualification for taking out this olive's volume of bread from the temple courtyard occurs as soon as he walks out of the walls of the temple courtyard. Now, outside the walls of the temple courtyard, it's still considered a private domain in regard to the laws of Shabbat, because it's still surrounded. There was a place called Chel, surrounded by walls, or Ezrat Nashim, which was also a private domain. So therefore, Shabbat lo michayev adim afik leil shel rabim. It does not become liable for Shabbat transfer until he goes even more outside to the public domain. So there, the fact that an olive's volume becomes disqualified has nothing to do with the laws of Shabbat. It's in a different area. Avalacha, but here, when this person threw this olive's volume of truma into this house, it's simultaneously that both things take effect. Shabbat vetum'ah ba'de'adadekatyan. The violation of Shabbat and the contraction of tum'ah come about simultaneously. The 2 situations are therefore not comparable, so Rava's question remains unresolved. Yeah, but so that remains a doubt. There's no resolution. Okay, another thing the Mishnah said, Eino chayav chazar v'yechniso. If a person, let's say, considered a single kernel of wheat significant, he wanted to plant it, he took it outside, and then on the same Shabbat, he changed his mind and decided to eat it. Now for eating, this is obviously an insufficient amount, and then if he brought it back into the private domain, he's not liable like anyone else, unless he brought in an amount of a fixed volume. And the question is, Chazar v'chniso eino chayav ela k'shiuro? Pshita, of course. Once he decided not to plant it, so its significance is now gone. So of course he should not be liable for less than the regular amount of a fixed volume. So the answer is that there must be a novelty here in this Mishnah. Amar Abaye, hacha b'may askinan. What's the case? Kegon shezrakol ha'otzar. He brought it back into the private domain, but in a special way. He threw it into the storehouse, but its position in the storehouse is distinct and recognizable. So now you could have thought that since he bothered to store it in a recognizable, distinct place, so it still retains its original status of something significant. He did not do any act that demonstrates that he does not anymore consider it significant for planting. So Kamash Belan, that's the novelty of the Mishnah, that just the fact that he threw it to the storehouse, he annulled the original intent of planting completely, and therefore he's not liable for. Yeah. No, so his act demonstrates what he thinks. No, we talk about a basketball player. He knows where he throws it to. No. So that's the case. Even though he intentionally put it he threw it to a distinct, recognizable place. Yeah. But since he didn't say anything and he just threw it there, just the fact that he threw it to a storehouse alone is sufficient to say that he does not want to plant it. Okay, now the next Mishnah speaks about amotzi ochalin, if one takes out foodstuffs from a private house, unetanan alei skupa, and he placed them on the threshold. Now the threshold, the Gemara says, is a karmelit. It's neither private domain nor public domain. Yeah, in the middle. So then, ben shechazar v'otzian, whether he himself returns and take it out again to the public domain, ben shotzian acher, or whether somebody else took it to the public domain, patur. They're all exempt, mipnei shelo asa melachta b'vat echad, because he did not perform the labor all at once. He placed it down in the karmelit, so that basically cancels the first. Hanacha, it is hanacha. Yeah, Carmelit, there's no liability. Carmelit is only rabbinic. Yeah, it's just a rabbinic domain. It's not biblically. Carmelit is called exempt area. And then the Mishnah speaks about kupa shemele'a perot, a basket filled with produce, and he took it from his house. Unetana al kupa chitzana, and he placed it on the outer threshold, which is a public domain. So the Mishnah says, even though most of the produce in the basket is outside, already in the public domain, he is not liable yet, patur, until he takes out the entire basket into the public domain. If you take a utensil and you do not change the place of the entire utensil, if even a small part of it is still in the same domain, you're not liable. No, the majority does not fit. Oh, so the Gemara discusses what exactly is in the basket. Is it small things or large things? So that's another dispute in the Gemara between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan. But before that, we first have to explain the beginning of the Mishnah that says, what is that threshold that we say that one is not liable for placing it there and from taking it from there to the public domain? If that threshold itself is a public domain, patur, the Mishnah says is exempt. How come? He just transferred something from a private domain to a public domain. Maybe that's a private domain, that threshold. So then how could it be? The Mishnah says, ben shechazar v'otzian, whether he himself took it from there to the public domain or somebody else, so ben shotzian acher patur is exempt. But if that threshold is a private domain and somebody took it from there to the public domain, so then of course he should be liable for transferring from a private domain to a public domain. So as we said, the thing must be that this threshold is it's a karmelit. Is kupa karmelit. And this Mishnah is informing us that the Akamash Belan Tama the Nach Karmelit only because he placed the object down in the Carmelit, he's exempt, because that's like a break. Like severs the labor into two parts. But if he did not place it in the Carmelit, he just passed by there, he walked through there, then he would be liable, Michayev. Even though he was taking it, carrying from the private domain, not directly to the public domain, even though on the way he walked through Carmelit, he would still be liable. And that's a novelty because there's a Tana who disagrees with that. Matnitin de loke Ben Azai, that's Ben Azai. Ben Azai holds that if somebody walks in a certain domain, it's as if he rests there. And if he rests there and he places the object there. So according to Ben Azai, if somebody walks from a private domain to a public domain through Carmelit, he would not be liable because
he throws this, he's got a sack of potatoes. He throws it onto the kupa, but most of it is resting in the other domain. Part of it is still on the.
So that's a point of dispute just now in the Gemara, because the sack is like a utensil, and the content of it. Now the question is, does the fact that it's one utensil render everything in it like one unit, or like different units? So that's a dispute just now. So matnitin de loke Ben Azai, the Mishnah is unlike Ben Azai. The Tanya, as this Paita says, we have it also in the beginning of the tractate, page 6, I think, 5 or 6. The Tanya, if somebody takes out an object from a store which is a private domain to a public plaza which is a public domain by walking through a Carmelit, Chayav, the sages say he's liable. But Uven Azai poter, because mehalech keomed, if he walks, is like standing there. So according to Ben Azai, he's not liable. No, he took it from the private domain. He picked it up in the private domain. He walked through the Carmelit and placed it down in the public domain. Right. So that's the dispute. Is he considered like as if he stood in the Carmelit, like took a rest, and as if he placed it down in the Carmelit, or no, just walked there? So no, if he stops there to rest, so then all agree that he's not liable, because
that's what they do sometimes in the army when it's a situation where it's not for sure you need to be Mechalel Shabbat. So that's one of the tricks that they use. That they'll like go slowly, or two people hold the
something together, yeah.
And if he throws it, is it what's the?
If he throws it, then even better.
Even though in some cases considered it comes to rest at each particular point.
I know, so that's another dispute. Kluta kemishurcha, but Ben Azai holds that he is liable. He's liable, and also the Yerushalmi says another case is if he jumps. If he jumps directly from the private domain to the public domain, and jumps above the Carmelit, he's also liable. Yeah. And now we come to this dispute. Kupashi Mel we spoke about a basket filled with produce. And now the question is, does the basket render everything in it like one unit or not? And the practical difference between the opinions will be, what if in the basket are small things and some of them entirely went outside from the one domain to the other, but not the basket itself? So Amar Chizkiah says, Lo shanu ela bekupa mele'a kishuin v'dluin. The Mishnah's ruling that one is exempt as long as the entire basket is not outside only applies to a case where it's filled with cucumbers and gourds, which each unit of produce is very long. And in that case, in case some of the basket is still inside, unavoidably the end of these produce is also inside. So there's not even one unit inside this basket which is entirely outside. In that case, says Ben Azai, he's exempt. However, but if it's full of mustard seeds, which are small, so in that case, chayav, he is liable, even though the entire basket is not outside. But since unavoidably some seeds are entirely outside, so then for these seeds he's liable. So Chizkiah says that the fact that these seeds are located in this basket does not render them all like one unit. Each seed is still retains its independence. Oh, that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. That's a dispute. That's the point of dispute. So Chizkiah says is liable, and the Gemara explains it in the phrase of Alma Kasavar Eged Kli Loshmei Eged. He holds that the bond of a vessel is not recognized as a true bond. Conceivably, one might argue that although some individual units of produce have been transferred, still those pieces that are not totally removed from the first domain because they're still in a vessel that is partly inside of the first domain. That's what Rabbi Yochanan holds. So the Gemara characterizes this idea with the words Eged Kli, Shmei Eged. The bond of a utensil is regarded as a bond. The bond created by a utensil between the items inside it and the domain it has not fully left forces us to regard the items inside the utensil as being within that domain too. So Chizkiah does not hold that, but Rabbi Yochanan does. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Afilu melei chardal, even if the basket is full of mustard seeds, and in that case many seeds are entirely outside in the public domain, but still the person is exempt, patur. Why? Because we regard the entire utensil as one thing, one unit, and as long as the utensil is not entirely outside, he's not liable.
Does everybody agree that if in a bucket, let's say you have big things like you shouldn't be doing, that everything is considered one unit?
Yeah. Then all agree that since the ends of these cucumbers are still inside, then all agree that he's not liable.
A bunch of bananas. It's not in the utensil per se.
But it's one bundle.
Someone resting on the coupon, someone inside. It's all part of that one unit.
It's one bundle.
Yeah.
Interesting question. I'm not sure. There's no utensil that unites them, but there's the attachment to the thing, like with cluster.
Yeah.
So, do you consider that one unit or a few units? I'm not sure.
I mean, it would seem like a unit,
But when you go to the supermarket, you can separate yourself and decide what you want to take. So,
but at the time when it was transferred,
it was one thing attached. Okay, Al-Makasar, Rabbi Yochanan holds that this is a bond. And now comes Rabbi Zeira and says that the Mishnah actually contradicts itself, and from the Mishnah we can make two opposite inferences. Amar Rabbi Zeira, matnitin delo ki Chizkiah daika udelo ki Rabbi Yochanan daika. The Mishnah does not precisely conform with Chizkiah nor with Rabbi Yochanan. Ki Chizkiah lo tanya, lo daika. Why? The Katani, the Mishnah says, Ad sheyotzi et kol hakupa, is not liable unless he takes out the entire basket. Now, this implies that Ta'amad Chol HaKuppah, that he should be liable only if he takes out the entire basket, Hakol HaPirot, but is not liable for taking out the entire produce inside the basket.
That doesn't make sense.
Why not?
You can have all the produce. Use the basket behind, it's a big deal.
Yeah, what if just the one side of the rim stays inside and the content of the basket is already outside, and just the edge of the basket is still inside? So the Mishnah says he's exempt, even though the produce in it is already outside entirely. So restart Zoom. It's about to expire. Resume. Okay. So let's resume. Yeah. Okay, so that's unlike Chizkiah, but Akol HaPirot, Patur, if he only took out the produce within the basket, but not the basket itself, the Mishnah appears to be implying that he is exempt. Alma Kasavar Eged Klishme Eged. So this Mishnah seems like maintains that the bond of a vessel is recognized as a true bond. That's one thing against Chizkiah and for Rabbi Yochanan, but there's also an opposite inference. Rabbi Yochanan, lo daika, also the Mishnah does not precisely conform with Rabbi Yochanan, the Katani, because the Mishnah says, Afal pi sherov peirot mibachutz, even though most of the produce is outside. In the public domain, he is not liable, which implies that only if most of the produce is outside, he is not liable, but if all the produce is outside, he would be liable, even though the basket is not entirely outside. Yeah. Either way, the Mishnah itself contradicts itself. Ta'amad derov peirot sounds like only because most of the produce is outside, but not all of it. hakol hapirot. But if all the produce is outside, even though the basket is not entirely outside, afal gav de'agid hakupa megavai, chayav, he's liable. Al makasavar eged kli losh me'eged. So this part of the Mishnah implies that the bond of a utensil is not considered like a, a true bond. No, so Ve'ela Kasha said now we have a problem with the Mishnah itself. There are two opposite inferences from two parts of the Mishnah. So, okay, each one of them explains it according to his method, to his perspective. Each one explains it according to his understanding. According to his reasoning. When the Mishnah says that he's not liable unless he takes out the entire basket, he explains that this refers to a specific case. Only if it's full of cucumbers or gourds that are long, and as long as it does not take out the entire basket, not even one unit of this produce is entirely outside. So to take out even one unit of the produce, he must take out the entire basket because they're so long. But in case it would be full of mustard seeds, the Mishnah would not say that Chizkiah says.
You could also have a case of big things where one of them is entirely outside.
Oh, in that case, he would say that he's liable for that one thing. So, but if it's full of mustard seeds, according to Chizkiah, it's as if the entire basket was taken outside and he's liable. That's how Chizkiah explains it according to his perspective. He also explains the Mishnah according to his understanding. When the Mishnah says, even though most of the produce is outside, he is exempt. And he explains that the Mishnah means not just most of the produce. Even if all the produce is outside, he could still be exempt. Until he takes out the entire basket.
Very interesting because Rabbi Yochanan was the student of Chizkiah.
Rabbi Yochanan was student of Chizkiah?
Chizkiah was the son of Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia had two twins, Rabbi Yehuda and Chizkiah.
Yeah.
And it says that till Chizkiah died, until he stopped teaching, Rabbi Yochanan wasn't appointed as the Rav. So I guess he must have contradicted him later.
No, so it sounds like Rabbi Chia was maybe greater than Rabbi Yochanan, but Chizkiah, Rabbi Chia's son, the thing was contemporary with Rabbi Yochanan.
I just imagine.
It says that he was his disciple?
Yeah. And he wasn't appointed until Rabbi Yochanan wasn't appointed.
Until
Chizkiah finished teaching it, so he died.
Till Chizkiah died.
Yeah.
Not Rabbi Chia.
Not Rabbi Chia. So I guess he had this machloket after he died, because he probably wouldn't contradict his teacher while he was alive or while he was teaching.
No, why not? We found many disputes between teachers and students.
Or he might have become a Talmid Chaver later on.
No, even a student can argue with his teacher. Why not? It's legitimate. There's a democracy in Judaism.
Pluralism.
Yeah. Okay, Meitavei, now comes the challenge to Chizkiah. And the challenge is from a Braita that says, if one takes out a peddler's basket. Now the peddler sells different spices for women. If you placed it on the outer threshold in a public domain, even though most of the various types of spices in the basket are outside, Patur, he is exempt. Until he takes out the entire basket. Now, we assume that what types of spices are there? That there are bundles of small bundles of shredded spices. So according to this, some of these small bundles are entirely outside, and yet the Baita says he's not liable because they're all contained within one basket, and that one basket is one unit. It's a bond. It creates a bond. Right. So the fact that some of these spices are taken entirely outside within the basket is not enough because it's a bond. It's one bond of this basket. So so that's difficult to Chizkiah. But the answer is, of course, according to his method perspective. The case here is the basket contains bundles of long stems, each of which spans the full interior of the basket. So therefore, as long as the entire basket does not stand outside, so not even one unit within it was taken entirely outside, and that's why he's not liable. But according to Chizkiah, if within the basket would be small things that are entirely outside, it would be liable for that, even though the basket itself is not completely outside. But here there are long things that are like cucumbers and gourds. But he says that there's not even one unit that was taken outside.
Took, like I was talking about bananas, you took a clump of grapes, you threw them on there, and then you got something smaller, they're the outside.
That are outside? Yeah, cluster of grapes.
Is it one unit again, or is it
The same question as with a banana.
smaller?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Would you say a cluster of banana?
Yeah,
Bunch of bananas. Cluster of grapes. So the same question. I'm not sure. And now comes another challenge, actually to Rabbi Yochanan. Mativ Rav Bivi bar Abaye. This is from a Baita that appears in Masechet Ketubot. Hagonev kis b'Shabbat. If one steals a purse on Shabbat, not only is he stealing, but he does it on Shabbat. Chayav, he is liable, even though in spite of the concept, Kimle b'derabba minei, even though if a person does one act which renders him liable to two liabilities, he's only punished with a more severe one, and here the liability for Shabbat is obviously more severe than the liability for stealing. In this case, he's liable because the two liabilities do not apply to him simultaneously. Why? Because he became liable for stealing before he came to the point of liability for Shabbat. Why? Because as soon as he picked it up in the house of the victim, he's liable for stealing. Hagbaha acquires, even in a private domain that belongs to somebody else, but he's not liable for Shabbat until he actually takes it out to the public domain. That's a later stage. No, picking it up, lifting it in the house is already gneva. Yeah, because the hagbaha, lifting it, acquires in any place. If he repented, so then he wouldn't take it out to the public domain. That's something else, but it's not the case. The Baita deals with another case. He continued to take it out.
Well, there's a secular law. If you pick up something in the shop, they follow you, and only when you move outside the shop, you can stick it under your jacket. It's really not the shop, you can always say it wasn't my intention.
As long as you're in the shop, you can still pay for it.
So you actually need
Yeah, because then you can still return it or pay for it.
Yeah, it's right to shoot it.
But if it is known that the intention was to steal it, so then he's liable from the moment he lifted it. And then Ayam Megarev would say, if he was dragging it on the floor, in this case, Patur, he's exempt from the liability for the theft. Why? Because then simultaneously he becomes liable for stealing and violation of Shabbat. He's not liable for stealing when he drags it in the floor of the victim because it's not an act of acquisition that can take effect there. In this case, the prohibition against theft and the Shabbat prohibition come simultaneously. Only when he takes it outside from the private domain to the public domain, simultaneously he acquires the theft and also liable for Shabbat. So then he's exempt for the theft because Shabbat liability is a more severe liability. Now this is difficult to Rabbi Yochanan because if it's correct, what Rabbi Yochanan says that eged klish me eged, that the bond of a vessel is regarded a bond as far as Shabbat law is concerned, so then even in this case, the liability for the theft precedes the liability for Shabbat. Kadimle isur gneva isur Shabbat, because we would not view the coins in the purse as having been transferred until the entire purse leaves the victim's domain. That's as far as Shabbat laws are concerned. But as far as the theft laws are concerned, once the opening of the purse is outside, he is liable for stealing. Because through the opening, which is already in the public domain, he can take the coins from the purse. So if he took it with the opening first outside, as soon as the opening of the purse is outside, he's liable for stealing. He's not yet liable for Shabbat until the entire purse leaves the private domain. So why does the Baita say that he's exempt in that case? According to Rabbi Yochanan, it should have been liable. The answer is that if he took the purse out by its mouth, achinami, so then indeed he would be liable for both. In the case he's exempt is the afke derech shulaf, that he took the purse out by its underside. In such a case, the theft prohibition and the Shabbat prohibition apply simultaneously. He clutched. Yeah, he knows how to do it. He clutched the bottom of the purse and dragged it out that way. Hence, the mouth of the purse was the last part of the vessel to reach the new domain. This being so, the theft occurs only when the entire purse enters the new domain. For it's only at this point that any of the coins become accessible there. Since according to Rabbi Yochanan, the Shabbat violation also occurs when the entire purse comes to the new domain, it emerges that the two liabilities come about simultaneously. So that's why he's exempt. At the same time. But the question is, even if he takes it by way of its underside, there's still the place of the stitching where the seams are bound together, and as a thief, he obviously knows how to unstitch it and take out the coins. So he still should be liable for the coins before Shabbat. What? Yeah, but as a thief, for a professional thief, obviously he can do it very easily. Untie the stitches and... No, but he should be liable for stealing because of the potential that the coins are accessible. For him, the coins are accessible as soon as the underside of the purse is in the public domain. Well, they buy mafkalev shakil. If he wants, he can simply tear open the seams and take the coins. Even before the... Yeah, but a thief doesn't care. It steals on Shabbat. He takes it to the public domain. He wouldn't care about tearing that. Yeah. So the answer is that the case is benascha. That purse contains long silver bars that span the full length of the purse. And as such, since no individual bar would fully leave the old domain before the entire purse, even the theft cannot occur until the whole purse passes into the new domain. Meshicha is not effective until the whole item being acquired passes into the new domain. Like the long cucumbers and the same principle. But there's still a question in this because since typically a purse has a drawstring connected to the purse. So now, if he drags the purse, so now, as far as the laws of theft are concerned, once the mouth of the purse is outside in the public domain, he's liable for stealing. But since the drawstrings are still inside the private domain, so as far as the laws of Shabbat are concerned, the entire utensil is not outside, so a vessel is not. So you should not be liable for Shabbat. That's one answer. Two answers. So the question is, the thief can now simply take the purse out until its mouth. Then he can loosen the drawstring and remove the silver bars. And yet, the drawstrings are still bound to the inside. So you should not be liable yet for Shabbat. So there are two answers. One answer is the Leika Shansin, there's no drawstrings. Or, as you say, the drawstrings are wrapped around the purse, so there's nothing left. The entire thing is outside. No Kaddish today.